On this episode of Weekend Spin, Elton John will release what he refers to as his best artistic achievement, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. Released in May 1975, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy is the 9th studio album by Elton John. The album is a concept album that recounts the early musical careers and struggles of Elton John and his songwriting partner, Bernie Taupin, or Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, respectively. Sadly, it was also the last album to feature the original Elton John band lineup of guitarist Davy Johnstone, bassist Dee Murray, percussionist Ray Cooper, and drummer Nigel Olsson. Elton has always referred to this album as his best artistic achievement. And I have to agree, the songs just overflow with beautiful, aching, melancholy, and sentiment. It is my personal favorite of his. Reportedly, Elton John, Bernie Taupin, the Elton John Band, and producer Gus Dudgeon worked longer and harder on this album than on any other previous album, recording it in about a month's time. Looking back, it's hard to believe that during the time that is now referred to as his classic 70s period, Elton recorded most of his albums in the period of a few days, sometimes just a few weeks. Even the epic double album Goodbye Yellow Brick Road was recorded in just a few weeks' time. In addition, the album's gatefold cover is wonderfully adorned with what I can only describe as just amazingly intricate art by artist Alan Aldridge, art that is clearly drawing inspiration from the Renaissance painting The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch. Some of his artwork is also featured in the enclosed lyrics book, but we'll talk more about the packaging in a bit. For right now, let's dive into the tracks. Track 1, Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. This song opens with a very quiet and unassuming Americana country western styled guitar riff, and features some very nice but subtle interplay between Elton on electric piano and Davy Johnstone on acoustic guitar. In this song, Elton introduces himself and Bernie Taupin as their alter egos. Captain Fantastic, raised and regimented, hardly a hero, just someone his mother might know. At this point, they are both just starry-eyed young kids full of dreams. And there is such a wonderful and very sincere sense of sentimentality to this song's opening. And this sentimentality will carry over into a lot of the album's other songs as well. As the drums kick in, though, our characters become struggling artists. For we were spinning out our lines, walking on the wire. Hand in hand went music and the rhyme. The captain and the kid, stepping in the ring. From here on, Sonny, it's a long and lonely climb. Now, whenever I listen to this track, I am always amazed at how many musical moving parts there are to it. We may have started with just a very simple acoustic guitar introduction, but before you know it, Nigel Olsson's drums, Dee Murray's bass have joined in. Also along for the ride is Ray Cooper's multiple hand percussion instruments. Not to mention the additional electric guitars and mandolin performed by Davy Johnstone. By the time we get to the build, the song has managed to somehow miraculously shift from Americana into funk.
Too hot for the band, with a desperate desire for change.
And the simple, unpretentious music that opened the song has now transformed into full, in-your-face rock and roll as it exclaims our duo's eventual success in the music industry. We've thrown in the towel too many times, out for the count and when we're down. Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy, from the end of the world to your town.
More from me and all the world to your town.
This song could have easily been titled The Ballad of Elton and Bernie, as each verse, in a very idealized fashion, tells the story of our two main characters. Each verse progresses their stories from starry-eyed kids to struggling artists to global superstars. It's an impressive opening, both musically and lyrically. If you doubt me, let me ask you, have you ever tried writing a song? Imagine being handed a lyric with no music or melody to a song entitled Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy. I doubt that your first thought would be, oh yeah, that'll be easy to sing. Most songwriters would probably tell you, hey, that's just too wordy, tone it down a little. Elton takes Bernie's very complex lyrics and makes them sound easy. Track 2, Tower of Babel.
It's party time for the guys in the town of Babel. Sodom and Gomorrah.
Elton goes full-on rock and roll gospel with this one. Davy Johnstone delivers some amazing guitar riffing, both during the verses and during the instrumental breaks. And I have to admit, this is a very dark track for Elton and Bernie. It uses a lot of biblical imagery, and over the years, I have sometimes wondered, what exactly is this song about? Growing up, I was raised in a very conservative religious upbringing. So with all of its biblical imagery, it would be just very easy for me to take it very literally. But this album is about Elton and Bernie's early years and early struggles breaking into the music business. So I would guess that all the biblical imagery has more to do with the music industry than an actual little interpretation of the Bible. It's party time for the guys in the Tower of Babel. Sodom meet Gomorrah, Cain meet Abel. Have a ball, y'all. See the lechers crawl with the call girls under the table. Watch them dig their graves, 'cause Jesus don't save the guys in the Tower of Babel. And I would conclude that this song's fire and brimstone lyrics are a critique on how the music industry treats the creative people that it feeds off of. Track 3, Bitter Fingers.
It's hard to write a song with bitter fingers. So much to prove, so few to tell you why. Those old diehards.
Unlike Tower of Babel, there is no shrouded mystery as to what this song might be about. No metaphors to interpret. It's pretty straightforward. It's well known that Elton and Bernie spent a lot of their early days writing not for themselves, but working for Dick James Music, writing for their artists, as they tried to get their songs placed with artists who could take them to the next level as a songwriting team. This song opens with a beautiful piano arpeggio melody, and begins very optimistically and upbeat, and the lyrics do reflect this.
I'm going on the circuit. I'm doing all the clubs.
Then there is this very abrupt key change and tempo change that sounds very influenced by The Who.
Help us. It's hard to write a song.
And the whole mood of the song changes. It's hard to write a song with bitter fingers. So much to prove, so few to tell you why. These old diehards in Denmark Street start laughing at the keyboard player's hollow, haunted eyes. It's one thing to hear Elton sing this, but it's when you actually read the lyrics that you see just how emotionally naked he allows his feelings to be. This song is about the feeling of being asked to create music on demand, to fit another artist's requirements, and how that doing this is not going to be enough for either of them. I mentioned earlier that there is some influence of The Who during this part of the song, but I should also mention and point out Davy Johnstone's very Brian May-style guitar lines on this one. Queen was on their 4th album at this point, and I am sure that, like any guitarist, Davy Johnstone was listening to and learning from the competition. Nigel Olsson keeps his drums quietly in check during the song's beginning so as to make it more impactful when he does come in thundering during the song's chorus. Like the album's title track, it's a slow build. The song's beginning sounds very cheery and sentimental, but once the chorus kicks in, it's off the charts with how in-your-face it is. Track 4, Tell Me When the Whistle Blows.
Take my ears and tell me when the whistle blows. Wake me up and tell.
This is the album's soul track. Dee Murray and Nigel Olsson deliver a smooth groove, and Davy Johnstone delivers a very funkified, aggressive guitar solo. By the way, I really do need to take a moment and just mention that I think that Davy Johnstone is one of the most underrated guitarists of the classic rock era, and honestly, I think he deserves a video of his own. Perhaps I'll do one someday. Now, this track is supposed to be about Bernie Taupin and how teaming up with Elton changed his life, but honestly, I could probably interpret this song in so many ways. Mostly, I think this song is just about being young and feeling hungry and wanting to take on the world. Track 5, Someone Saved My Life Tonight. This, of course, was the album's huge radio hit. Lyrically, this song is easy to read as being partly about Elton's engagement with Linda Woodrow, who was his fiancée in 1968, about having to put up appearances in a society that would have condemned him for being homosexual, something that he kept hidden at this time, and about his suicide attempt some years later. Musically, Elton's opening piano riff sounds not unlike a wedding march. Someone Saved My Life Tonight is written in the key of G major. It opens with the 1 chord of the scale, which is a G major chord. However, Elton plays it in the 2nd position. It's interesting that in the 1 position, a G major chord is happy and bright. Played in the 2nd position, it has a slightly more serious feel to it. But then Elton does something rather unexpected. He puts a D note in the bass underneath it. Suddenly it has this majestic feeling of reflection and wonder. Also, the bass line that I just played is the beginning of a D major scale. So many unusual choices here. I'm sure Elton isn't thinking about this. He's just finding the notes that work together. When I think of those eastern lights, muggy nights, curtains drawn in the little room downstairs. A wedding that he almost might have taken part in, against his true nature. But by the song's end, this wedding march is a march towards independence and forging your own identity, and not letting society's constraints restrict you. Altar-bound, hypnotized, sweet freedom whispered in my ear. You're a butterfly, and butterflies are free to fly. In the lyric book for the album, the song Someone Saved My Life Tonight is illustrated with a picture of musician Long John Baldry, whose band Bluesology featured Elton on keyboards. He is the man who talked Elton out of getting married, and is therefore the someone referred to in the song. In the lyric book, he is cryptically referred to as LJB, though. Side 2, Track 7, Gotta Get a Meal Ticket. A number of tracks on this album start quiet, but then build up to a high point. But not Gotta Get a Meal Ticket. This one just rocks your socks off from start to finish. I have to reflect on Elton's very impressive vocal range during this time period. Not just the highs and lows that he could hit note-wise, but his ability to go from tender ballads 1 minute and then to be able to growl like a rocker on the next. Davy Johnstone's guitar riffs, not to mention his guitar solos, are mean, they are tough. Elton rocks the piano, and if you listen carefully, you can hear him play some Stevie Wonder-esque clavinet as well. By the way, did I mention that I think that Davy Johnstone is incredibly underrated? Well, I should also mention just how underrated Nigel Lawson and Dee Murray are as well. On this particular track, Nigel and Dee are the gravity that keeps everything else from flying into space. The lyrics are about struggling to survive, but lyrics like, when the line's been signed, you're someone else, do yourself a favor, the meal ticket does the rest. A line like this feels like it's pointing to the idea of signing a music contract out of desperation to survive. From the heavy rock of Gotta Get a Meal Ticket, we launch into track 8, Better Off Dead.
Then you're better off dead if you haven't yet died.
Honestly, this song feels more like something from a Gilbert and Sullivan opera than an actual rock album. But don't worry, Nigel Olsson's drums will change all of that in just a few moments. The opening verse features some of Bernie's best lyrical turn of phrases ever, as he describes a darker, seedier part of town just before the sun rises. This is one of those songs that feels like it's from a musical that never existed but should have, and I can actually see the stage production in my head whenever I hear it. Lyrically, this one appears to be about observations made by Bernie from inside the window of an all-night cafe, or maybe Bernie and Elton, since he does use the phrase, "We watch the arrested get taken away." This is a fun song that could have also been recorded by Queen without anyone batting an eyelid. I especially really enjoy Nigel Olsson's drums on this one. They are played more like timpani than they are traditional drums, and producer Gus Dudgeon's production accents this even further. Track 9, Writing. Some of Davy Johnstone's most beautiful guitar lines are featured on this track that manages to be both upbeat and laid back at the same time. This opening guitar riff sounds very reminiscent of bands like America, and in my opinion, there is a definite SoCal vibe to it. I have to point out, however, that its laid-back mood is deceiving. Just like with the title track, there are a lot of musical moving parts moving in and out of this song. Davy Johnstone overdubs multiple guitar lines that intersect with each other, and this adds a very subtle level of complexity to the recording. Ray Cooper also contributes some very effective percussion textures as well. The lyrics are an idealized reminiscence of Elton and Bernie's first years as a songwriting duo, back when they had no idea what the future had in store for them. It is a wonderful, uplifting song that always elevates my mood. We have now arrived at the last 2 songs on the album, and I'll be honest, they are my 2 personal favorites. I do love every song on this album, but if I had to pick just 2, it would be these 2. Track 10, We All Fall in Love Sometimes. Now, I should mention that track 10 and track 11 flow into each other in the same way that Funeral for a Friend and Love Lies Bleeding do on Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. And from the moment I first heard Elton's very beautiful, haunting opening piano melody, I thought to myself, haven't I heard this somewhere before? There is a very strong classical music influence to this piano opening, and I kept thinking he must have taken inspiration from some other older piece of classical music, but over the years, I have yet to find what that older piece of music might be. So at this point, I have to assume that he didn't. However, if anyone out there has some thoughts on this. If you've thought the same thing when you've heard this track, please let me know, especially if you can name any similar older piece of music that you might think compares to it. And then there is the opening verse.
What's been said? It looks like rain today. It crackled on the speakers and trickled down the sleepy subway train. Heavy eyes can hardly hold us, aching legs that often told us it's all worth it. We all fall in love sometimes.
Such somber lyrics. Now, if you look this one up on Lyrics Genius, it features a really good interpretation of this part of the lyrics from a contributor to the site with the handle Blue Purple Sunrise. I'm going to quote from it right now. Elton and Bernie are working so hard to write music together, and they're touring extensively, and they're completely exhausted. But they acknowledge that their exhaustion is worth being able to pursue what they both want to do more than anything in the world. That it's okay to fall in love with what they're doing, and also work to the brink of collapse to see the dream through. I would say this interpretation is pretty spot on. Every song on this album is to one degree or another about Elton and or Bernie and their songwriting partnership. And in the enclosed lyric book for this album, this particular song is illustrated with an image of a framed copy of the handwritten lyrics to your song, Elton and Bernie's first big hit. The full moon's bright, and starlight filled the evening. We wrote it, and I played it. Something happened. It's so strange, this feeling. It reads like a deeply romantic love song, but it's not. In interviews, Elton has been very frank about the deep, emotional, but unromantic connection he feels with Bernie Taupin. He has referred to it as one of the most important relationships in his life, and that it goes way beyond a creative partnership, but that it is not sexual. We All Fall in Love Sometimes describes that love. It's a musical love, a musical partnership, and a musical marriage. And with this album now almost 50 years in the rearview mirror, I can finally understand what this song is actually about. But back in the 70s, when I first heard this song and read these lyrics as a teenager, I heard them and interpreted them through a very different lens. This would be the lens of a young teenager who had only recently started to awaken to the newer feelings of sex and romantic love. And with that awakening came an onslaught of mixed emotions and feelings. Feelings of fear and trepidation one minute, and feelings of excitement and anticipation the next. So when my young teenage self first listened to these lyrics, I connected with those lyrics because I felt that they described my own personal experience of waking up to new feelings and new emotions that previously had only really existed in the movies and TV shows that I watched on TV as a kid. That realization that I was no longer the kid I once was, and that I would never be that kid again. Now, growing up, I was certainly aware that this change in life would occur, but I still found myself feeling very blindsided when it did. You know, every artist has an intent when they are creating art. But once they release that art into the world, that intent can oftentimes be recontextualized by the listener. And how they recontextualize it is dependent on their own individual experiences. Track 11, Curtains.
I used to know this old scarecrow.
As far as the album's concept and theme goes, this might be the most obliquely subjective song on the whole album. And over the years, it has become my personal favorite of all time. Elton's piano is very sparse on this one, and I like to think that it's a deliberate choice because he wants you to focus on Bernie's lyrics versus focusing on his piano. I used to know this old scarecrow. He was my song, my joy and sorrow. Back in the 70s, I was unaware of the song Scarecrow, a pre-fame Elton demo that didn't see an official release till 2021's Jewel Box. This song was the first collaboration between Elton and Bernie. With the gift of hindsight, this opening verse is very clear. But in 1975, I interpreted this lyric to mean something else. That the old scarecrow mentioned in the lyrics was the imaginary friend we might have had as kids, cast alone between the furrows of a field no longer sown by anyone. Listening to this lyric, I would imagine a young kid who lived on a farm, and he had this secret place where he could be away from the adults. And for company, there was this abandoned scarecrow that no longer served any practical purpose anymore, except to be an imaginary companion. I held a dandelion that said the time had come to leave upon the wind, not to return when summer burned the earth again. To me, these lyrics symbolized the passing of childhood to adulthood, and the realization that even though you might still be able to keep a small part of that time of your life inside of you forever, you will never able to be that person ever again. Cultivate the freshest flower this garden ever grew. Beneath these branches, I once wrote such childish words for you. The meaning of this lyric is, of course, obvious now with the gift of hindsight. But in the 70s, I imagined a young dreamer with a blank notepad creating stories that only young dreamers can create. But that's okay. There's treasure children always seek to find. And just like us, you must have had a once upon a time. When you are a child, you can believe that there might be hidden treasure in your backyard. And honestly, I hope to find treasure every time I listen to an album that I've never heard before. Everything has a beginning. And if you look hard enough, you can find a story behind almost anything or anyone. And in my interpretation of the song's lyrics, the scarecrow had a story behind it long before the young boy in the song found him. Now, throughout this video, I have been talking about the considerable talents of the musicians who worked on it, but I really need to end here by briefly discussing Gus Dudgeon's magical and perfect production. During Elton's golden period that was the 1970s, Gus Dudgeon was Elton John's George Martin. And in my opinion, there was no other producer before or since that has managed to elevate the songwriting of Elton and Bernie in the way that he did. In 2006, Elton and Bernie would collaborate on a sequel album entitled The Captain and the Kid. I went into this album with realistic expectations because, honestly, you never really can go back home again. I'm happy to say that I did find it to be a good, solid album. I currently own 3 different versions of this album. First, here is my vintage 1970s US pressing of the album. Of course, here is that beautiful gatefold artwork by Alan Aldridge. Also included is a fold-out poster of the gatefold cover. I'm not going to be pulling that out because it's kind of fragile. Now, also included were these 2 booklets. The first one is a lyrics booklet. It features more art by Alan Aldridge, plus it features vintage photos. There's also an additional lyric for a song called Dogs in the Kitchen that was never released on the album and I assume never recorded, but they did include the lyric here. Also, there was a second booklet. This booklet is called Scraps, and like the title implies, it is a scrapbook. It features a lot of vintage photographs of Elton, Bernie, and members of the Elton John band. In addition, there's also lots of early newspaper clippings and journal and diary entries. At the end of this book is a 4-page comic book. This comic book is a mini autobiography titled The Life and Loves of Elton John. This is probably not the most historically accurate telling of Elton's story, but it is fun to read. I should note that at the time this was released, Elton John was still closeted about his homosexuality. So this comic strip actually portrays him as a heterosexual. Not too long after the release of this album, Elton John would come out of the closet. I remember he got a lot of hate back then. He got a lot of backlash, and I believe it affected his album sales for a while. For a while, this was my only LP version of the album, but on my recent trip to England, I managed to find a first UK pressing as well. I'm not going to pull this one out. We're just going to leave it here since everything looks the same. Now, in addition, I also have this 2-CD deluxe edition. This double CD set contains, of course, the album remastered, plus 4 bonus tracks. And then the second disc contains a live concert where Elton performed the album in its entirety. Also included are mini replica versions of the fold-out poster and the 2 booklets that came with the original LP. Captain Fantastic and the Brown Dirt Cowboy is all about nostalgia, about looking back on a time now gone. I was a young teenager when this album was released, and as those teenage years progressed, I became more and more acutely aware that childhood was over. And for the first time in my life, I was feeling a sense of nostalgia for what once was, for a period of time in my life that was now over and that I would never get back. And for me, this album embodied those feelings and helped me process them. As a teenager, I listened to this album over and over again, and I still, even to this day, regularly come back to it. Elton John was the reason I became a musician, and this album stands as my personal favorite by him. Those are my thoughts on the album. Please let me know yours. I'm anxious to hear what you have to say in the comments. In a few moments, I'm going to reveal the album title for our next episode. But first, I need your help. If you like these videos and want to see more, please click like, click subscribe, and hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a video. If you want to show some additional support, you can always leave a one-time super thanks. You might also want to consider becoming a patron supporter and making a monthly pledge. Patron supporters do receive exclusive weekly videos not available on this channel. So what album will be featured in the next episode of Weekend Spin? Well, to be honest, I haven't quite decided. So the series is going to take a short hiatus, and in the meantime, I would like to know what you think of not only this episode, but the series in general. And if you're a subscriber, there is a poll that I have posted on the community forum where you can nominate what album you would like to see me cover next. Mostly though, I just want to say thanks for stopping by. I really appreciate that you let me come into your life and discuss music with you. And I can't wait to hear your feedback on this one. Everybody, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.